Welcome, brave souls, to a night of mystery and terror. Are you ready to step into the darkness? Hold your breath, because tonight's story will haunt you long after the lights go out.
At the time, I was just a 14-year-old boy living on Long Island, New York. Hi, my name is Nick. I still live on Long Island, but a few towns away from where this traumatic event happened. It took place at my childhood home. I won't specify the exact location, but let's just say I lived in the suburbs, not deep in the woods, but surrounded by plenty of nature and trees. It was a beautiful, and no, I mean beautiful summer night. I remember looking up at the clouds, gazing for hours, and talking with my two friends, John and David. John and David were just like me. They loved the outdoors and were amazed by the smell of pine. It was the night of a sleepover that we had planned for weeks. Our plan was to go outside at 9 o'clock, watch a scary movie on my TV, and then when the movie was over, go back inside, relax, and most likely fall asleep for the night. Before we knew it, the movie was over, and we were ready to get into our pajamas and head upstairs to my bedroom and the two sofas. We fell asleep very quickly. In fact, I don't think it was even 11 o'clock before we hit the hay. I guess we were tired. I woke up at 2:21 in the morning with a tap on my shoulder. It was David. Annoyed, I said, "Oh, what do you want?" "Nick, there's someone banging on your door," David said. "It's probably just my parents coming home from the party, remember?" I said, folding the blanket back over my head, thinking that David and John were just overreacting. "Nick, I know your parents. This man is not your dad." When he said there was only one man, my heart sank. My mom and dad had gone to a party and left us home alone for the sleepover. They wouldn't come home separately. They would come home together. Concerned, I got up and saw that John was also standing outside my window, looking down at the door. I saw a shadow at the door. I rubbed my eyes and then saw who it was. A man who appeared to be in his early 30s or 40s, wearing a hospital gown, banging on the door. We said nothing as we watched the man continue to bang on the door. Scared and confused, we were too stunned to call the police. After about 5 more minutes, the man stopped. He turned as if he was going to leave, but halfway down my driveway he stopped and pulled out a butcher knife from a pocket in his gown. After pulling out the weapon, he turned back to the door and began stabbing at the screen. Our hearts were in our throats. In a daze, we were too shocked to call the police for help. To this day, I have no idea how he managed what he was about to do. Somehow, he got the door open and walked into the house. Since our bedroom door was closed, we had no idea where he was going. At this point, we called the police and told them what was going on. We were all crying and trying not to make any noise, feeling utterly helpless. We heard footsteps coming up the stairs toward our room. The only thing that we had to defend ourselves was a small pocket knife that I had bought for myself when I was in the Boy Scouts. We heard the steps getting closer and closer. Since we were only 14, our only thought was to hide. We hid behind the door so that if he came in, we could attack. Sure enough, he came face to face with the door. He kicked it open and went to my bed, looking under the covers to see if anyone was there. This was a life or death situation. If one of us didn't act fast, it would be over. John grabbed the pocket knife from my hand and stabbed the man in the neck. He let out a screech so loud, it felt like my eardrums were going to burst. He fell over screaming in pain. We all kicked him in the ribs repeatedly, the chest, the neck, until he was knocked out. We then ran as fast as we could to the nearest house for cover. My neighbor's house. They stayed up late, so I knew they would be awake. We banged on their door and explained what was happening when they opened. They let us in and we watched the police arrive moments later. They ran into the house, grabbed the man, and put him in handcuffs. As the police dragged him out, we saw that he was awake. He looked at us and started laughing and smiling while holding his neck. We stared at him, unable to say anything. We just watched as the man was taken away. To this day, we have no idea who he was. He had no record in any nearby hospitals. No record at all. No family, no friends, no home. It was as if he just appeared out of nowhere. The man is locked away, hopefully for a long time. John and David are still my friends, but we never had a sleepover alone again. When I was 16 years old, I had an encounter on the streets that to this day I consider the single most unsettling experience of my life. I live in southern Ontario, in a medium-sized city called St. Catharines, located near the US border, Niagara Falls, and the nearby Great Lakes Erie and Ontario. The city earned the nickname the Garden City due to its numerous parks, trails, and gardens scattered throughout. As such, many parts of the town are shaded by tree cover and adjoin various woodlots, fantastic for a daytime stroll, but usually home to some of the city's vagrants and drug addicts at night. Most of the town is quite nice, with the Niagara region boasting significant infrastructure development. The downtown area, lively with Brock University and Niagara College students, has a bustling nightlife that was a lot of fun. However, like any tourist destination or university town, gentrification often results in pockets of forgotten poverty on the city's fringes, much like dust swept under a dorm room rug. All in all, it was a great place to grow up. It could be rough at times, but so can any other town or city if you look hard enough. I was raised to be aware of the dangers of addiction and the immorality of some of the seedier parts of town, and it never really bothered me. Up until the time these events took place, I was blissfully ignorant of what that truly meant. Years later, as I recount what happened, I realize it didn't bother me because, until then, it had not affected me in the slightest. If you were walking through town at any time and happened to pass someone in a mental health crisis, screaming at passersby or themselves, you knew to keep your head down or fiddle with your phone to avoid engaging. If you were the target of their ramblings, you would quickly be replaced by the next passerby or visual stimulus in their unhinged state of mind. It may sound cold, but there are far too many sad cases in most cities for them to be your problem. You have to keep your safety and schedule in mind. If you stopped to help or engage with everyone you felt inclined to help, you would be constantly late at best and could get hurt at worst. It was better to mind your own business and to stick to your own. My group essentially stuck to its social circles, and for me, the focal point was always video games and online interactions. We would have game nights, playing D&D online or World of Warcraft until the early hours of the morning. The area that I grew up in wasn't too loud. It was located up one of the main streets leading directly into the downtown core, but not so close to the city center as to be considered sketchy. Parts of that road could be, especially near the old hospital now torn down and replaced with a fenced-off lot overgrown with tall grasses and remnants of century-old brickwork. The further you went out of town on this road, the nicer and safer it felt to walk the streets at night. As cliché as it sounds, once you crossed the railroad tracks, you were in the downtrodden and seedy part of town. I always felt lucky to live on the opposite side of the tracks. One night, my friends and I were playing WoW late into the night. Being prone to staying in my room all night, I decided to get some fresh air. It was about 1 a.m., and I figured I would head down the road to the local Big B, a chain of convenience stores located just on the other side of the tracks, downtown Queenston Avenue, the aforementioned sketchy street where the hospital used to be. Many people would dread going out on Queenston at this time of night, let alone crossing the tracks. But I wasn't particularly worried. It was only a short walk from the turnoff onto my street, and I was a bigger guy. I didn't think anything would happen and told myself that if anything did, I would probably be fine. The night was quite peaceful as I walked along the sidewalk, illuminated by dim porch lights and the gentle hum of air conditioners working away in the warm summer air. There wasn't a soul around, which I was grateful for. As I made the turn onto the main street, the energy of the town was relatively calm, and I wasn't particularly bothered by being out so late and alone. As I approached the tracks, I had my music playing in one ear and kept the other ear free to listen for oncoming traffic or anything else. There was a park down the hill just past the tracks, and as I reached the road at the top of the hill, I encountered a man coming up the incline, huffing and staggering with his head down, and eyes peering cautiously from beneath his hood. Keen to avoid engagement, I always told myself I would ignore them initially, and if that didn't work, I would stop and try to be polite to avoid upsetting anyone who might be unstable. Something told me this guy was going to try to talk to me, and as it is often the case, my intuition was correct. "Hey, buddy!" My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly went into my standard protocol, thumbing on my phone for a new track and ignoring him as I continued walking. "Hey, man, hey, stop for a second." I calmly put my phone back into my pocket and turned around, pretending I hadn't heard him the first time, and asking what he needed. "Got a smoke?" "No, sorry man, I don't smoke. Or I'd give you a few." The man didn't seem to believe me. He lifted his head to meet my eyes in the dim glow of the streetlight. He looked rough, skinny and emaciated, with pockmarks and a smattering of open sores, likely from hard use. His dead eyes had a piercing thirst as he scanned me over, evidently sizing me up to see if I was lying, or if I had something of value that he might be able to take. "Oh, okay, he said insincerely, continuing to stand there awkwardly, his eyes still fixed on me as he glanced over his shoulders to check his surroundings. "Hey, can you do me a favor? There's something I need to move that I left down in the park. It's a TV, just a TV. I can't move it myself." I'm kind of on a timeline. I gotta get going. I'm sorry." "Hey, are you sure?" said the man. "It won't take long to get to it where I'm at. I'll give you money. Or some cigarettes." At this point, I was thinking to myself, right. Why would he be moving a television through a heavily wooded park? And so much for needing a smoke. You would give me cigarettes, what? I thought you didn't have any. With alarm bells going off in my head, I really just wanted to get away from this man as quickly as possible, without escalating the situation. "Sorry man, I don't smoke. My parents are waiting for me to come back with some milk. I already forgot. I have to go get it before they wonder where I am." "Oh, okay. Well, I could always come with you. We could grab that first. I'll even pay for it if you help move my TV. It is pretty heavy. I don't want someone to take it while I'm trying to find help, you know?" I must have looked visibly scared at this point, because he started to double down, trying to get me to come with him, and he had a grin that was now showing slightly from beneath his scruffy facial hair. "Good luck, man," I said, trying to end the conversation and head off to the store. "I hope you find someone to help you. Must be a pretty nice score." Yeah. Hey, how old are you anyway?" I'm 16. I lied. I'm actually not supposed to be out right now, man. I gotta go. The man looked frustrated and disappointed when I told him this, but he immediately gave up trying, and his demeanor lightened as we neared the end of the conversation. I began to step back as I wished him good luck once more. He started to turn around, but not before saying something that chilled me to my core. 16, never mind. Never mind. You're too young for me anyway. I hurried off as soon as he started walking in the other direction, and nearly started sprinting when I saw the soft yellow glow of the convenience store coming up on my right. As soon as I got inside, I called an Uber and quickly grabbed my snacks and, just in case, some milk. I didn't even need the milk. I just didn't want to not have it if I encountered him again. Luckily, the Uber was only a minute away and arrived by the time I paid and walked out of the store. I hopped in the car, grateful and relieved that I wouldn't have to walk back home. As we passed the tracks, I cautiously glanced to the right and noticed, off in the shadows of the trees along the clearing, the silhouette of a hooded man smoking a cigarette and watching the sidewalk with predatory eyes. I will never go out that late again. I'm 31, and though I may not be considered old to tell you guys this story, I have to take you back years ago. At the time of this incident, I will call it, I was 24. Working for a popular convenience store chain in my area, I had managed to make my way up the promotional ladder to assistant manager, and a lot of the times I was the closing manager on duty. Not an issue typically. Well, I was employed in a suburban area of North Carolina, and my store didn't close until 10 p.m. I had worked plenty of closing shifts myself, despite the climbing crime rate in my area. I'm the type of female that thinks of herself as someone who can handle herself. One night, though, this would all change for me, because until you must handle yourself, do you truly know if you can or cannot? I came into work that Friday at my normal shift start time of 3 p.m., and was scheduled as usual to close. My last employee would end his shift at 8 p.m. Typically after that time, there was nothing really to do in the store, except for front face, cleaning, other closing duties. Once those were finished though, I found myself spending free time on my phone until locking up and clocking out. Part of the closing duties was always taking the trash out to the dumpster behind the store. This night was no different. Aside from the creepy darkness, the back lot was illuminated by one light in the back of the parking lot. I had never had any issues with taking the trash out, and none of my employees had ever reposted having issues either. This night would prove to be very different. As I approached the dumpster and threw in the bags of trash, I heard a squelching sound. The obvious sound of, in my mind, an animal possibly eating something, maybe another animal. So, I grabbed a long stick and was going to use it to hit the side of the dumpster and frighten away the animal I thought was there. I stepped to the side and peeked around the back corner of the dump and made eye contact with a man crouched down, looking over his shoulder with a knife in his teeth. We locked stares. As we stared, he continued to cut into something. No, I shouldn't say cut. He was sawing into something shrouded in the darkness and producing a lot of blood. Not wasting time, I maintained eye contact with him as I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off him. He grinned, the knife still stationed between his teeth, and began standing. I still had no idea what he was sawing into. Honestly, I wasn't trying to spend much time figuring it out. Still eyes locked, I backed away faster, timing when I was going to turn and run for my life into the store and lock it. About halfway through the back lot, this man, now on his feet, eyes still locked, he began walking towards me. When I made my decision to run, it was like he had read my mind and charged. I took off with every bit of speed I could muster and made it to the back door of the store and into it, shutting it right as he reached the door himself. Locking the door and setting the alarm, I dug my phone out of my pocket and called the police. All the while, this stranger is banging on the door of the store, yelling in some sort of odd language, one I have never heard before. About 20 minutes later, as I was hiding between the aisles in the store, because the entire front of the store was all glass windows, and my creep of a new friend could see me right through them, should he look. There was a tapping sound on the glass door. At first, I froze, remembering that dumpster dude had a knife, and that sound seemed quite like what a knife would sound like if someone were to tap it against a glass surface. But soon after the sound, an officer announced his presence, and I slowly crept from my dark hiding spot to see 3 local police officers there, with flashlights. I went to the door and let them in, explaining as we made our way to the back of the store that the guy had quit banging and yelling quite some time ago, and I didn't think that he was still there. There was no chance, though, that he was able to clean up everything from behind the dumpster in the short amount of time that it was quiet. I turned the alarm off and unlocked and opened the back door for them to go out. I followed behind, letting my curiosity of what they would find guide me. One of the officers asked me to point them in the direction of the area that I had seen the man. I pointed to the only dumpster in the lot, telling them that the man was crouched behind it, sawing into something that was producing a lot of blood. Just as I finished explaining this, the officer next to me said to the others, "Y'all, take a look at this," as he shone his light on the asphalt of the parking lot. We could all make out the very clear impressions of bare human footprints in what seems to be a brownish, red liquid going across the lot to the store and fading out about a quarter of the way back from the store to the dumpster. I guess trying to rule out if I was playing some cruel joke, 2 of the 3 officers pointed their flashlights at my feet, seeing that I was definitely wearing my non-slip black work tennis shoes, and no blood was apparent anywhere on my person. Approaching the dumpster, an officer placed himself in front of me, and they all 3 drew their weapons, and one shouted in a very official and stern voice, "Police officer, I know you're back there. Show yourself now. Come out with your hands up." No one came out, and no sounds were made. Turning the corner, the officers all sighed in unison as they came upon a pool of blood, a knife, and no person. There was no animal, no body, nothing. Just blood, and a lot of it. They marked off the scene with the yellow crime scene tape and began gathering evidence, eventually allowing me to leave after writing down my statement and what I had witnessed and went through. The man behind the dumpster was apprehended a couple days later in his home, which was only a few miles behind the store. He was arrested and questioned. Apparently, after hours of interrogation, the man admitted to abducting and killing someone within his trailer park. And what I witnessed was the dismemberment of them. His pursuit of me was to make sure I saw nothing, and was to ensure that if I did, or didn't, I wouldn't be able to talk about what I had seen or had not seen. Following this incident, I refused to close that store alone again, and willingly my store manager agreed. It wasn't long after this, though, that I took a position within the same company, just at another store, in what seems to be a safer area. All I know is that I'm glad they caught this man, because this man was looking for me. He was apprehended a few hours after coming into the store and asking the on-duty cashier for me by name. Knowing the situation, the cashier, then and now a close friend of mine, called in the suspicious man, asking for me by name. He was trying to get her to tell him when I worked again, if I work often, and for my phone number. Thank goodness she's one of the smarter ones, and understood there's policy in place that prohibits the release of that information to anyone. All day long, I had been having deja vu. Was it really Halloween again already? Because it felt like it was only yesterday. The drunken parties, the stupid costumes, the orange and black jello shots, trick-or-treaters parading through the streets past houses with candlelit pumpkins outside, cobwebs and ghosts, skeletons and streamers, little packages of candy, chocolate, and chips with far too much packaging. I felt like I had been through it 100 times already, and I was only 21. But at least a Halloween party was better than sitting in the college dorms alone, bored out of my mind. My costume still fit me from the year prior. A simple black and white long-sleeve shirt and pants, decorated to bear a striking resemblance to a skeleton when seen in the dark. After putting on my outfit, I heard a knock at the door. I knew who it would be even before I opened it. Unsurprisingly, it was Tom, standing there in the dorm's hallway, looking ridiculous in his red and black devil face paint. He was holding a pitchfork in one hand and a 12-pack of beer in the other, wearing a black cape and pants with a crimson red button-up shirt. A pair of horns were attached to his head, and a shiny black tail with a triangle at the end of it, constructed entirely of duct tape, hung unceremoniously from his ass. "Ready?" he asked, skipping all formalities as only best friends can do. "Yeah, just let me grab my Mickey." I had already filled up the little silver flask with rum, but took a quick swig of it and topped it off again from the bottle. The taste was horrible, and I felt the burn in my throat instantly, grimacing at the unpleasant sensation. Beer tasted better, but I wasn't going to lug around half a case like Tom was planning on doing all night. No thanks. Closing the door and locking it behind me, we left my dorm room to head off to the first party of the night. It was located at a house off campus and would be a little bit of a walk, but that was okay. The night was young, and it was Halloween. I was starting to get into the spirit of things again. People were walking up and down the dormitory halls, wearing costumes of all shapes and sizes. Inflatable aliens, creepy grim reapers, sexy nurses, and various other sexy occupations. Those were always popular. I was reminded once again, as we walked past 100 different young women, that I was still single, despite 2 months in the dorms, and everyone else I knew hooking up together. What else was new? The walk out of the dorms was crowded as everybody seemed to be leaving to go to parties or other places. Some people hadn't bothered to put on a costume, and others, like me, were half-assing it. I saw lots of people carrying cheap-looking masks in their hands or wearing brown bathrobes and carrying fake lightsabers. Eventually, we got outside. The air was crisp and fresh, a beautiful autumn night with the smell of fallen leaves hanging in the air. We made our way over to the busy street towards the neighborhood across from the college. The sound of squealing tires caught my attention, and I stopped at the last second, avoiding catastrophic injury. "Hey, watch it!" Tom yelled as a car turned to the corner quickly in front of us, making an illegal turn and almost hitting us as we crossed the street. Someone screamed a slurred obscenity at us from the back of the car and threw a crumpled can in our direction. It spilled its contents all over me, soaking the front of my shirt in lukewarm liquid that stank of malty beer and backwash.
Hit that subscribe
"What a
button and
bunch
turn
of
on the
dicks,"
notification bell
Tom
to
muttered
stay
as we
updated with our
walked across
latest
to the
videos.
other
Join
side.
our community today.
I suddenly had that feeling of deja vu once again. It was so much stronger this time, though. Like the memory of what had happened was in my mind already, latent and hidden, and I had simply awoken it by experiencing that predetermined event. "Whoa," I said, grabbing my temple and feeling woozy for a moment. "You alright?" "Yeah, it's just... Do you ever get deja vu? I've been getting it all day and it's really bad right now." I feel like we did all this before. Does that make any sense? Totally. I get that all the time. Like I had a dream of something but forgot about it until it happened in real life, Tom said, reassuring me. Right, I said, regaining my composure. I'm probably just tired. We started walking again, and as we entered the neighborhood, I saw something odd. All of the pumpkins, which would normally be on people's front doorsteps, were instead at the curb, as if being left out early for trash collection. When we got closer, I started to see why. The pumpkins were all rotten, sagging and decayed. Their carved faces looked sad and drooping, despite the fact that it was still early in the season. Usually, you saw those sort of nasty, rotted pumpkins being left out for the garbage man a week or two later, in mid-November. Still, every single house had the same phenomena, a sagging, droopy jack-o'-lantern left out by the curb, as if they were diseased and people didn't want them near their houses. What's the deal with all the pumpkins? Tom asked, crouching down and looking at one up close, wrinkling his nose in distaste. Careful! I nearly screamed, surprising even myself. I covered my mouth, unsure why that had slipped out. A sense of dread was looming over me. Careful? Why? It's just a pumpkin. He started poking at it, and that was when I saw the bugs crawling around in the puddle of goo near the base of it. They looked like potato bugs, only larger, and instead of gray, they were black, yellow, and orange, the colors of Halloween. What are those things? Tom saw them all around his feet and backed up a bit, much to my relief. But then, seeing how afraid I was, he picked up one of the bugs by its thorax and held it up in the air, inspecting it. Candy corn, he said, bringing the squirming bug closer to his opening mouth. I knew he wouldn't actually eat it, but then he kept bringing it closer and closer until it was past his teeth, its tiny legs kicking wildly, the bug nearly sitting on his tongue. Stop, man, that's disgusting. He started to laugh, but then began coughing as the bug sprayed some brownish-looking fluid into his mouth. Looking with revulsion at the weird bug in his hand, he threw it away, spitting out the brownish black tar-stained saliva. Yuck! Freaking bug just took a dump in my mouth! Tom was shouting, opening up a beer to try and wash the taste out. That's what you get, you sick bastard. I wonder if it's some new invasive species, like those Japanese stink bugs. Strangely, he didn't answer, just chugged his beer and then stood there staring at me, looking zoned out. Either way, that's nasty. Come on, let's go. We started walking again, heading in the direction of the party. It was only a few blocks away, so it wouldn't take long to get there. Tom was already acting drunk, and I rolled my eyes a bit, thinking he was pretending. I didn't understand why he would do that, but he definitely hadn't had enough to drink to warrant his stumbling gait. I just figured he was being his typical self, a lovable but frustrating buffoon. We went inside the small house, which was packed like a phone booth during Frosh Week. Immediately, we were greeted by flashing strobe lights, loud music, and a crush of random strangers. I didn't recognize anybody and felt increasingly panicked as we found our way through the horde of sweaty, inebriated people. Eventually, we spotted our friends Jamie and Ellie sitting in a back room playing video games. This was much more our speed, as opposed to the keg stands and Jaeger shots happening in the main living area. So we stuck around with them and watched as they played Mario Kart, rather than enduring the trials and tribulations of meeting new people. What took you numbnuts so long? Jamie asked, twisting the controller in his hand, breaking his character into a well-executed power slide. He was wearing a Hunter S. Thompson costume, complete with a straw cigarette, tan-brimmed hat, and aviator sunglasses. His game character fell off a ledge into darkness, and he threw the controller to the floor in frustration. Damn it! We can't stop here, this is Bat Country! Ghost House is the worst level. Why did I let you talk me into this? Ellie just laughed and kept playing, ignoring the fact that he had quit. "Hey guys, check out my briefcase. Straight out of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas," Jamie said, producing a white suitcase which matched his elaborate costume, completing the effect. He opened up the white leather satchel to reveal an array of plastic baggies filled with various substances of questionable legality. Tom was very quiet during all this, and I turned around to see him sitting there, looking queasy and spaced out. His eyes appeared glazed over, and yet he hadn't touched his other beers. "Hey, you okay, man?" I asked him. He didn't look like himself. Tom's red-rimmed eyes snapped over to look at me quickly, and he nodded. But despite that, I could tell he wasn't. He wasn't really looking at me, I realized, but through me. "Yeah, I'm good. Why?" I studied his face for a moment. In the incandescent lights of the room, his skin looked a little bit yellow-orange suddenly, like a jaundiced Oompa Loompa. "Forget it. I'm gonna go see if there's something to eat out there. Anybody want anything?" Ellie had lit up a joint and was passing it around the room. "Yo, grab some more of that pumpkin pie. That shit is amazing." There were plates all around the room with the residue of the pies left on them, crumbs and bits of orange filling. Just looking at those plates made my heart sink and gave me that feeling of false memories once more, but I quickly shrugged it off again. I couldn't help but wonder if those pies were from the same place everybody was buying those tainted jack-o'-lanterns from. Taking one last worried look at Tom, I opened the door and left the room to head back into the noisy main living area. I saw someone I recognized, finally. "Hey, where have you been hiding?" Sarah, the host of the party, asked, shouting over the music when I saw her in the kitchen. She was in all of my classes and had been nice enough to invite me. We had always been friendly, but now she was giving me a flirtatious look that said perhaps she wanted to be more than just friendly. "In the back room with Tom, Ellie, and Jamie," I shouted back, trying to be heard over the loud bass. "Playing Mario Kart." The second I began to say playing Mario Kart, the music abruptly stopped as somebody switched songs. Everybody in the kitchen turned to look at me, and I heard a few snickers. I could feel my face turning red, getting hotter and hotter as I stood there. You could hear a pin drop. Sarah smiled beautifully at my complete lack of social grace, blushing for me also. "Do you have anything to eat around here?" I asked, trying to change the subject as the music started up again. "Been hanging out with Ellie, huh? Got the munchies?" She joked, gently shoving me. "We've got a ton of pumpkin pie, that's about it. Randy brought them. His dad owns the farm with the pumpkin patch. He said they didn't sell very well this year for some reason." The pie tins were scattered everywhere, dozens of them, all mostly eaten. I looked around the room and saw paper plates with pie crumbs on them, dirty forks hanging off the sides. That rising sense of doom and dread began to bloom within me once again, for reasons I couldn't explain. The bugs. What? There were these weird bugs in the pumpkins, all up and down the street, and the ones out front of your house, too. Oh yeah, they went off really early this year. I saw a few weird-looking maggots in them, so I threw them to the curb, but I'm just glad nobody smashed them yet. Probably because nobody wants to go near them. They're a pestilence, a plague. My thoughts were racing a mile a minute, flashes of false memories and things that hadn't happened yet. What was happening to me? "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, looking worried. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "No, not a ghost. Something worse than that. I have seen the Great Pumpkin." I looked back at the pies on the table again. They appeared different than before. They were moving. Was I dreaming? Was this a nightmare? No. As much as I wished that were true, I could tell that it was not. Orange and black maggots were squirming and crawling from the pie tins, and were now all over the counter in droves. I pointed them out to Sarah, and she blinked a few times before really seeing them. Finally, she did, and she screamed, beginning to remember. Grabbing her hand, I pulled her out of the living room. The flashing strobe lights revealed a terrifying scene. People were changing. Their skin had turned yellow-orange, and their faces had swollen up like warty pumpkins. Giant red blisters and boils were blooming on their faces and necks, as their reddened eyes stared ahead, with no recognition of what was happening all around. All of the party guests looked like edematous pumpkin-headed zombies as they danced and drank beer slowly and without noticing what was happening all around them. Brownish fluid seeped from their pores, leaking from their swelling extremities. The orange and black potato bugs were all over the table, on the floors, walls, and ceiling, and they were crawling on the guests as they shoveled more of them into their mouths, laughing and crunching the bugs between their teeth like popcorn. "What the hell is happening to everybody?" Sarah nearly screamed. Everyone stopped and turned to look at us in unison. I pulled Sarah into the bathroom, trying to get away from everyone else before they turned on us. I had a feeling we weren't safe here. "Did you eat any of the pumpkin pie? Or touch any of the pumpkins?" She shook her head. "No." "Listen, I've been getting deja vu all day, and I'm beginning to think it's not a coincidence. I think I've been through this before. Maybe we've all been through this before. Living the same day over and over again. That's why the pumpkins look so old, and why I'm seeing things that haven't happened yet." She nodded, looking deep in thought. "Yeah, that makes sense. I've been getting these weird deja vu moments all day too. That's why I was looking for you. Something told me you would know what to do." "We need to go to the pumpkin patch," I said, not understanding why I was saying it, only knowing that I had to. "There's something wrong at the pumpkin patch, and I think we might be able to fix it before it's too late. Another version of us figured this out, some other time before this. Now we just have to follow through and finish it once and for all." Her eyes grew wide, and I saw she remembered. We had been there before, together. We had done all of this before. That's why it felt like I knew her so well. We had spent countless hours together. The problem was, all I could see were flashes of memories I had been forced to forget. I had always loved movies like Groundhog Day and Happy Death Day. How ironic that now I was stuck in one. It was a lot less fun in reality. What about Ellie and Jamie? And Tom? Oh no, what about Tom? I ran with her to the back room and saw that it was already too late. Tom had been affected the most, it seemed. His face was swollen like a balloon, and he was already changing into one of them. The blisters and boils had formed on his neck, face, and hands. They were bursting, and the horned points of massive insectile legs were beginning to emerge from where his bloodied flesh had burst open. He stood up, vacant-eyed and staring, then began stalking toward us as more joints of thin, long black legs appeared, emerging from bloody holes in his sides and shoulders. Ellie and Jamie stood as well, their stretching, papery skin yellow-orange, and their eyes glazed over, their necks and faces bulging and covered in warts. Their voices were no longer human, but sounded insectile as they buzzed and clicked and made strange, high-pitched noises to communicate with each other. Sarah and I turned and ran in the opposite direction, too terrified to scream. The sounds were coming from everywhere now, as the change seemed to be happening all around us. A guy with a swollen orange head wearing a Super Mario costume tried to punch me in the face with a white-gloved fist, just barely missing as I dodged out of the way. Guests wearing vampire capes with sharp teeth came at us. Zombies, mummies, and monsters of all shapes and sizes, covered with growing warts, bugs, and blisters that looked red and angry. They stopped us in our tracks just as we were about to escape, looming over us and approaching with bloodlust in their eyes. We dodged and evaded them as best we could, grateful that they were slow and stumbling after having just turned. Luckily, we managed to push them out of the way just before being overwhelmed by their numbers. I pulled open the front door and got out onto the road when someone called at us from up the street. It was Randy. I remembered flashes and bits of memories of him helping us. He was the one whose parents owned the pumpkin patch. He whistled at us and waved us over to his truck. "Please tell me I'm not going crazy," he said as we got closer. "I could have sworn we have done this before." He was wearing ripped, faded blue jeans and a plaid shirt, his long blonde hair unwashed and dirty. He had bags beneath his eyes, which revealed a long lack of sleep. "You're not crazy," I told him. "Do you have any idea what the hell we're supposed to do? Because all I know is we've got to get to your place, to where all this started." "That's fine by me. Something tells me we can't stay here and talk about it, though," he said, pointing towards the front door, where the party guests with bulging features were stumbling out, lumbering toward us, covered in blooming warts and crawling bugs. "Get in," he said, hopping into the driver's seat. We got into the truck, cramming into the cab together and slamming the door shut, just as several zombie-like trick-or-treaters got close. I locked my door just as they started pulling on the handle, trying to get in, their orange-tinted eyes glaring into mine as they groaned and wailed and slapped their bloodied palms angrily against the glass. "Go, go, go! Let's get out of here!" I yelled, grateful when he hit the gas and fled the scene. The farm was miles away, so we tried to use the time while driving to our advantage. I thought hard about the memories, tried to grab hold of them, but they were as slippery as fish, each time evading my grasp. Randy pulled into the long gravel driveway of his property, the truck fishtailing and swerving. I thought I heard something moving in the back of the vehicle, but when I looked over my shoulder, there was nothing there. An orange glow could be seen from the pumpkin patch as we drove towards the farmhouse. "I think I finally remember what I'm supposed to do," Randy said, his eyes looking far off and thoughtful. "We gotta blow up a pumpkin." He slammed his foot hard on the brakes and told us to head out into the field, that he would meet us out there in a minute. He had to grab something first. We followed Randy's instructions and ran out into the pumpkin patch. I heard the crunch of 1,000 bugs splattering beneath my feet as we ran through the field of rotten gourds. Our destination was obvious, the massive glowing pumpkin in the middle of the field. Standing in front of the otherworldly glow of it, I heard movement from the shadows. Looking around, I couldn't spot the source. Then, Randy came running through the field toward us, holding something in his hand. As he got closer, I saw what it was. A grenade. Don't ask me where I got this, guys, but here it is. Something's telling me that we need to destroy that giant pumpkin. It's the source of this plague. He stopped dead in his tracks just as he was about to reach us, as something skewered him from behind. The point of a long black talon appeared, sticking out of his abdomen, then suddenly disappeared. Standing behind him was what used to be my friend, Tom. His face a bloated mask of its old self. Huge insectile legs propelled him forward, his body hanging limply below. Eyes that were orange and malevolent stared back at me as he approached with lightning speed. With his last dying breath, Randy pulled the pin and tossed me the grenade. Not Tom's eyes grew wide, and he raced over towards me, outpaced by the thrown grenade. I caught it, then turned and ran, stumbling backwards, falling clumsily into the rotten orange flesh of the behemoth, then somehow going through it as if it were just a hologram. I landed inside the great orange glowing pumpkin. A multitude of instrument panels surrounded me, and high-tech looking displays, interstellar maps, and other machinery, levers and dials and video display monitors, all of which looked light years beyond any technology on Earth. And at the center of it all was a cylindrical tube containing a bright white light resembling an infinity sign, moving like liquid inside its vial. It reminded me a bit of the flux capacitor in Back to the Future, only it was larger and glowed brighter, white like the sun. I had a moment to think to myself, it's aliens. We're being invaded by aliens. And the realization hit me of what had been happening, just like it had 100 times before, or 1,000. The grenade felt warm in my hand, and it bloomed into a blinding flash in slow motion before my eyes. A low-pitched, deafening explosion rang slowly in my ears as time slowed to a crawl, the world turning white, and then black. I woke up with the worst hangover, blackout drunk on Devil's Night, and now napping the day away on Halloween, as best as I could remember. My mouth tasted like rum, although I couldn't recall having drank any. The bottle was still full and unopened on my dresser. Tom would be by any minute. I figured I'd fill up the flask and put on my costume while I waited for him. Naps only made me more tired anyways, and they always made me feel strange, like I was half asleep, half awake, dreaming with my eyes open. All day long, I had been getting déjà vu. Was it really Halloween again already? Because it felt like it was only yesterday.
Don't miss out on amazing content. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. Join our community today.